Hey everybody, how we doing? As promised, I have a recorded lesson for you today on Section 3. Section 3, we're going to talk about the miracles of Jesus. We have a couple miracles that we have to go over. Before we do that, I want to just quickly review with you what we talked about yesterday, give everybody a chance to take out their notes, and if you did not have a chance to copy down this slide, you can do so now. Just to sum up what we talked about yesterday, we talked about the bread of life, or the Eucharistic discourse. The passage that we read yesterday was from St. John's Gospel, and in the passage Jesus shocked many of his disciples when he tells them that one day he will give them his body and blood to eat and to drink. He even goes a step further when he tells them that this is the only way that they will be saved. Remember, he says, the only way to the Father is through me. All right? At this point in Jesus' ministry, many of the disciples of Jesus leave because they found his teaching way too difficult to understand. The Eucharistic discourse was given to his disciples on this day to prepare them for what he was going to do on the Last Supper. All right, Jesus lays it all out to his disciples and says that if they're going to follow him, the Eucharist is going to be the source and the summit of their faith. Okay, like we spoke about yesterday, the only way to get to the Father is through him. The people here are given a choice, and most of the people who have been following Jesus find this command just a little too hard, and remember, they actually turn away, and he loses many of his disciples. But again, when Jesus asks the apostles if they are going to leave him, it is Peter who says, "Who else are we going to go to? You're the only one promising eternal life." The apostles come to recognize the true nature of Jesus Christ as the Messiah and the Son of God. So that kind of wraps up Section 2, what we were talking about with the Eucharistic discourse. All right, by now we should all have our notes out, and we're going to go on to the next slide, which is Section 3. Section 3 is titled "The Authority of Jesus," and on this slide, it starts with a little question. Does Jesus have the power to change bread and wine into his body and his blood? Or does Jesus have the authority? Who is he to do this? And of course, the answer is yes. We've discussed it many times this year. Jesus is 100% man as well as 100% God. All right. After reading the story of the Eucharistic discourse, we could ask ourselves how it would be possible for somebody to change bread and wine into his body and his blood, especially an outsider that knows nothing of Christ. Does Jesus have the authority to change bread and wine into his body and his blood? Of course he does. All right, he's 100% God as well as 100% human. If you haven't caught on by now, you should be copying these notes as I go. That slide is not going to be up forever. Okay? We can split this 100% man and 100% God into two parts. He's 100% man or 100% human because he has a body and a soul. Okay, he was born of a woman. He does everything any other human being would do. When he is hungry, he eats. When he is thirsty, he drinks. He would bleed if he is cut. All right. He has emotions. There were times in his life when he felt joy and happiness. There were times in his life when he felt sadness and suffering. All right, through his emotions, we know he is a man. All right. He is also 100% God. Okay, we know this through the many miracles that he performed throughout his life and here on earth. He performed miracles when he cured those people who were sick. He even raised people from the dead. And we even know that he commanded nature to obey him. We know Jesus has the authority to change bread and wine into his body and his blood because of the nature miracles that he performed. Jesus proves many times that he can have complete control over nature. Therefore, it wouldn't be unrealistic to believe that somebody who has complete control over nature, or cure the sick, or heal the blind, would be able to change bread and wine into his body and his blood. So it's because he is 100% man and 100% God, we know that he has that authority. All right, and in this section, what we're going to see over the next two slides are just a few of the nature miracles of Jesus. And what we are trying to do with these miracles is prove that Jesus has the authority to change bread and wine into his body and his blood. Okay? So as you read, or as I read the miracles to you aloud, and then once you go over them for your homework, you have to ask yourself, does this miracle provide evidence that Jesus is God? Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through these miracles. So the miracles are pretty short, so what I'm going to do is I'll open my textbook and just read the miracles to you real fast. I'll go over a little bit of them. If I have things in my textbook that are highlighted, I will obviously show them to you on Friday for periods 3 and 4 and Monday for periods 6 and 7. I just wanted you to get some of the notes down and help you with your assignment tonight. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go. All right, this slide deals with the first two miracles, the multiplication of the loaves and the walking on water. Okay, multiplication of the loaves is found in John 6. What else is found in John 6? We just went over it yesterday. The Eucharistic Discourse. Remember I told you the Eucharistic Discourse actually starts on line 26 of John chapter 6. So here we see the first 16 lines of the multiplication of the loaves. Okay, in the multiplication of the loaves, Jesus gives thanks, multiplies 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to feed over 5,000 people. There's a total of 12 baskets of leftovers. All right, I'm just going to quickly read the miracle to you. John 6. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat with his own disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw the large crowd was coming to him, he turned to Philip, and he said, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" Jesus said this to test Philip because he knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, remember we talked about Simon Peter yesterday, said, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good are these for so many?" Jesus answered, "Have the people recline," which means have the people rest. Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined at about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much fish as they wanted. When they had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments leftovers, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from 5 barley loaves that they had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who has come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off as king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. All right, so in this miracle, we have to ask ourselves, again, what are we asking ourselves with all these miracles? Does Jesus have the power or the authority to change bread and wine into his body and his blood? And this is the best miracle that we could compare the Last Supper with. All right, in this miracle, Jesus foreshadows the Eucharist when he feeds 5,000 people just using 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus finished preaching and saw that there was a large crowd gathered to hear what he had to say. He took 5 loaves and 2 fish from a small boy, and after giving thanks to his Father, he distributed them to the crowd. All right, this is a perfect example of Jesus proving that he can change bread and wine into his body and his blood. If he could take 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and multiply it to feed 5,000 people, don't you think he could do that with his body and his blood? And of course, as we discussed in the last slide, the answer is yes. The next miracle is walking on water. And as you go into your textbook tonight, you'll see it's in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, and it's a quick one. He made the disciples get into the boat and precede him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain to pray by himself. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. So Jesus tells the apostles to get into the boat and go into the sea, go to the other side of the sea, and he'll meet them there. The apostles were just a few miles offshore when they were being tossed around. So during the watch of the night, he came towards them, walking on water. When the disciples saw that he was walking on water, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them. He said, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come out on the water." Of course it's Peter, right? Why wouldn't it be Peter? Peter walks out to meet Jesus. He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, "O ye of little faith, why do you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage and said, "Truly you are the Son of God." I want to focus here for a couple minutes on Peter. Obviously, Jesus displays that he has the authority over nature as he walks on water. Okay? Jesus says to the men in the boat, "It is I, do not be afraid." Okay? But we want to focus on Peter for a second here. Of course, it's Peter that stands up and says, "Lord, if it is you, command that I come out as well." Right? When Peter was focused on Jesus, he too could walk on water. All right, it got to a point where Peter was in such belief of it is Jesus on the water. When he steps out, he has 100% concentration and 100% focus on Christ. As soon as the wind comes and startles Peter, as soon as a wave hits his ankles, it's almost like he takes his eyes off of Jesus and he's focusing on the water. He focuses on the nature. And it's almost in that instance, in that half a second, he realizes what he's doing and he realizes he shouldn't be doing it. Right? It's almost as if he had blinders on for Jesus for the first couple of steps, and then all of a sudden the wind hits his face or the wave crashes upon his ankles, and he realizes what's going on, and in that instance he loses focus on Christ. And that's when he needs to ask Jesus for help. Okay, the saving power of Christ must be a part of everything that we do. When we have our eyes, just like Peter, fixed on Jesus, there are few things in the world that we cannot do. The last two miracles that we're going to go over today, before you start your homework, is the calming of the sea and the wedding feast at Cana. Calming of the sea is also found in the Gospel of Matthew. All right, I'm going to read it to you real quick while you take notes. Jesus got into a boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a violent storm came up on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by waves. But Jesus was asleep. They came and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." He got up and said, "Why are you terrified, O you of little faith?" Then he got up, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. The men were amazed and said, "What sort of man is this, whom even the winds and the sea obey?" Jesus is in the middle of sleeping as the sea begins to rise up and cause havoc amongst the boat. And they wake Jesus up in a panic. "Save us, save us, we are terrified of dying." Jesus says, "Why are you terrified?" And he looks at the winds and the sea. He says, "Quiet, be still." And the sea listens to him. All right, in the story of the calming of the sea, Jesus once again commands nature. He's awakened by his apostles after a furious storm threatens their lives of everyone on the boat. The apostles failed to realize that the presence of Jesus was enough to keep them safe. He didn't need to be awake to save them. All right, our relationship is based on recognizing his presence in our life. The Eucharist is one of the most important ways to be with Jesus. All right, so this story of the calming of the sea should make us mindful, to pray, to go to Mass, and receive communion. And know that Jesus is always going to be there. All right, that was a nice quick story. Again, proving the authority of Jesus. All right, here he is commanding nature for the second time. The final story that we're going to go over today is the wedding feast at Cana, and that's in the Gospel of John. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine ran short, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "How does your concern affect me? My hour has not yet come." Almost as if to say to his mother, "This is not my problem. Right now, I do not need to be worrying about this. The time for me to go public with who I am is not right now." His mother, Mary, said to the servers, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish ceremonial washings, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told them, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Draw some out now and take it to the head waiter." So they took it out. And when the head waiter tasted the water that had become wine, without knowing where it came from, the head waiter called the bride and the groom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then when people have drunk freely, the inferior one. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this as the beginning of his signs in Cana in Galilee. So God revealed his glory, and his disciples began to believe him. So the important things we need to remember here is that it is Mary who prompts Jesus into performing this first miracle. Okay, this is Jesus' first miracle. Okay. If you noticed in the story in the Gospel of John, that's who tells the story, John, he never says Mary. Twice he referred to her, but he referred to her as Jesus' mother, or the mother of Jesus. John, throughout his Gospel, refuses to say the name Mary or his own name, John. Okay, and I believe it's in one of the pop-ups on page 55 that tells you John does not use his own name or the name of Mary in his Gospel. Instead, he refers to Mary as Jesus' mother, or the mother of Jesus, and he refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved, because he takes the attention away from himself and from Mary and puts the attention back on Jesus. He wants all the attention to be on Jesus. So whenever he refers to Mary, he says the mother of Jesus. Whenever he refers to himself, he says the disciple whom Jesus loved. Okay? We see at the wedding feast at Cana, okay, the weddings normally lasted for several days, not just a single day. All right, and the family throwing the wedding feast was responsible for the hospitality of their guests. All right, they had to make sure there was enough food and wine, and it was extremely important for a married couple, okay, to make sure that each guest was fed. When the party ran out of wine, the guests would have seen this as a sign of disrespect towards them, and in turn would have served as an embarrassment for the couple. All right, we also see the faith of Mary. When Mary turns to Jesus and says, "They have no wine," and Jesus responds with, "It's not really my problem." Mary shows extreme faith as she tells the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." It seems that Mary does not know exactly what Jesus is doing. It seems that Mary does not know exactly what Jesus is going to do. All she knows is that the couple is in need and that he is going to help. All right, this is the first miracle that Jesus performs, and it comes at the request of Mary. At the Last Supper, Jesus will take wine and transform it into his blood. His ministry was centered around this sacrificial meal. Our lives must be centered at all times around the Eucharist. All right, and just to wrap up, all 4 of these nature miracles prove that Jesus is 100% God and 100% man, And he does, in fact, have the authority to change bread and wine into his body and his blood. It is a gift that Jesus gives his church. It's the gift that Jesus gives his church. The Eucharist is the source and the summit of our faith. If we are to become true followers of Jesus Christ, we must accept this invitation to receive this gift at every opportunity. That wraps up section 3. All right, if you checked eBackpack last night, which I'm hoping you all did, okay, a couple things I want to remind you of. 1, the Words to Know quiz for periods 3 and periods 4 will be on Friday. Periods 6 and 7 will have the Word to Know quiz on Monday. What is due tomorrow? Well, assignment 16 is due tomorrow. Okay, that can be found on page that would be page 51. Okay, there's 4 questions. That's assignment 16, 4 questions. And then assignment 17, okay, is found on page 56. Okay, and assignment 17 is actually 2 parts. The first 5 questions are the only thing that's due tomorrow. It's part 1, assignment 16, part 1. Again, this is all in eBackpack. Make sure you check eBackpack. And again, periods 3 and 4 will be checked tomorrow. Periods 6 and 7 will be checked on Monday. Okay, since I'm not going to see half of you tomorrow on Friday, your homework, as it is on every Friday, is ask Mom and Dad to get to Mass. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to see the teacher or shoot me an email. Have a great day. Bye.